Hello and welcome to today's webinar where some of New Era's internal video collaboration experts will be discussing how organisations can manage complex video collaboration environments. I will shortly be handing over to three key members of the Global Video Collaboration Division here at New Era. Rob Westwood, our Global Director of Product and Solution Design. Joe Gillis, Vice President of Sales and heading up our Global Video Collaboration sales teams. And Chris Turner, Managed Services Team Lead. So without further ado, I will hand you over to the team now.
Thanks, Vicky. So I'm Rob Westwood, Director of Products for the Global Video Collaboration Division within New Era. Joe.
Thanks, Rob. I'm Joe Gillis, Vice President of Sales for the Global Video Collaboration Division within New Era Technology.
And I am Chris Turner. I'm the Managed Services Team Lead for the GVC at New Era Technology.
Right, so let's jump straight into it and let's talk about some of the key issues and considerations that we see for designing complex spaces. So what are we seeing in our customers' VC environments and what would we think make those environments complex?
I think what makes a lot of our customers complex is the need to support all the different types of technology that are out there and all the different means of communication. We have various platforms that people have been using since the pandemic, and now they're trying to find a way to bridge all of them into one and to make it as simple as possible for the end users. And because of that, it makes the systems a bit more complex, depending if you're in an auditorium or you're in a conference room, however that experience is it can increase the level of complexity in those rooms, and that's what we're seeing.
I think we're also seeing a pretty big shift over from platforms, right? So, I think going away from maybe some of the old standards-based video to Teams, that's been, going on for the past 4 years or so, and it's constantly evolving. So that journey is obviously a pretty big consideration too. Rob, what are you kind of seeing from your end of things?
Yeah, similar. So I think definitely seeing those multiple technology types, whether that's kind of Teams or legacy devices, but also kind of having multiple vendors within the ecosystems. So there could be vendor A and vendor B, and making sure that they kind of all integrate and work seamlessly. Now, those are the things that really have to be thought through when we're designing these spaces to make sure that there's no gotchas and things work as they should do. So in terms of those gotchas, what are the considerations you think customers should have when they're undergoing a VC transformation project, and how complex is that life cycle?
I think what customers need to consider when they're looking at these projects and how they want it to look for their end users is just what I just said, the end user experience and what they want that to be. As I mentioned, they want that simplification of the system. The end user wants to be able to walk into the room, just press a button and have it work. And they want to be able to talk to who they need to talk to and present what they need to present with no interruption, with no failure. That's exactly what they're looking for. But then on top of that, technology is completely changing. Rather than a 5 to 10 year life cycle, what we're seeing is it's down to maybe 3 years tops. And so how do they stay on top of that while future planning and making sure that the technology they put in those rooms last past that 3 years, but also have the ability to support the changing technology? An example would be when we're building out rooms, if it's a Microsoft Teams rooms, we want to make sure that whatever we're putting in there supports that Microsoft Teams technology. As Microsoft continues to look forward and expand their product, we want to make sure that that system is built to support it as they push forward. Joe, any thoughts?
I think it's a really good point you make there about those kind of future use cases. So designing the room to be fit for purpose for today, but then also trying to second guess almost. What are the future use cases? And I guess we see that more and more from a hybrid work perspective, and making sure that when users that are predominantly home based are coming into the office, are their use cases also supported? So it's covering the kind of the multiple ends of the scope really. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, no, totally agree. When you look for the future use case, I guess I'd pose a question back to you is like, so you have all these different systems, all these different platforms. Now, how would you support a multi-vendor room, especially in global scale? Because obviously so many customers now are global in nature, even multinational, whatever the case may be. How would you go about supporting that?
I mean, yeah, that's a really tricky question, isn't it? Because customers are typically set up to support a particular scope of estate, right? And what we've seen, I guess, post-pandemic, and we're probably way past talking about pandemic now, but post-pandemic, we've seen the number of rooms and devices and meetings, just scale and scale and scale. And I think some of the challenges that our customers have faced is not being able to perhaps scale as quickly as they would like to support as many of those different geographies or locations or device types. So I think the challenge there is how can they support that? And there's a couple of ways they could do it. They can obviously build out their team, and to do that, they obviously need to make sure that they've got the real estate to house all those people. They've got the right experts that are in the seats, they're signing up to the right kind of SLAs, or they can look to partner with a service provider who can deliver some of that or all of that on their behalf. So I don't think there's a single right answer for that. I think it's going to vary by customer and by organizational type. But I think it's clear what we're seeing from a support perspective is that the users of these devices in these rooms, they require support, and having that in place is crucial to a successful project.
Yeah, totally agree. Chris, would you say the same, or do you have any
Yeah.
other things to add?
I completely agree with that as well. And as the only thing I would add is to make sure that what we're seeing is customers on the global scale, those local regions want to make sure that they're being supported in their native language nowadays too. Where in the past it wasn't so much that we relied on English speakers, and most of these other global locations like Japan and Asia Pac, they were fine with English speaking. Now they want that more native speaking support. They want to be able to call, present what their problem in their native language, and have that person respond in that native language rather than going through a translator or through other means. They want that ability to do that because then they feel that level of concierge support. So that's another challenge I think customers are facing within their own help desk environments and support environments.
How about you, Joe? What do you see?
Yeah, no, I would echo exactly what you guys are saying, right? You've kind of very complex support ecosystem, and fortunately, unfortunately, I think it's very difficult for most of our customers to scale, especially on global type of deployment. That's why organizations like ours exist realistically, right? So obviously you have a lot of kind of the different systems and monitoring tools set up. I think we kind of help with some of those decisions when it comes to a tooling and an SLA kind of conversation. So totally agree with both you guys.
So just sticking on the kind of the user experience theme for a minute there. So how well do you think kind of the users in the room actually understand the technology that's being installed and know how to get the best use from it?
I think they have a level of knowledge in how it exists within their own residential environment. So a lot of users understand their laptop. A lot of users have their smart homes now where they have, one remote that controls everything, or they voice activation, those types of things. But outside of that, the back end of it, they don't have that experience or knowledge, and nor should they. I don't think they need to understand that. That's up to the support teams, the IT teams, or vendors such as ourselves and partners such as ourselves to do that. So that level of knowledge is where they are, but their expectation is that when they walk into that room, the knowledge that they have is the same when they walk into that room. That's what they want that experience to be. So that's my take on that. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, even on personal experience, sometimes you walk into one room, it has a different interface from another room, right? I would say that the users probably, other than hitting a button to join a meeting, I would say there's probably not a whole lot of knowledge or understanding, or maybe even care to understand what's going on behind the scenes. You just want it to work, right? So I think that's when, kind of understanding, like we started with the user and what that experience should look like, and really how you should minimize any type of downtime in trying to start a meeting. I think that becomes paramount. So your standards and your design discussion should not be kind of put to the wayside. It should be at the forefront of any of these decisions.
I guess with that said, and I think we're all saying the same thing, that really it should be transparent to the user. The technology is just there to facilitate somebody walking in and being able to conduct their job ultimately. So we're now seeing, I guess, speaking specifically for Teams, we have two different varieties. We have Android-based Microsoft Teams rooms, and we have Windows-based Microsoft Teams rooms. What are the implications of choosing one versus the other, or perhaps even having both?
That is a great question. I think when it comes to the implications, it's understanding, and it's for that customer on the, again, more on the back end, to understand that those Windows devices that are Teams rooms, if you want the latest and greatest right away, you get the Windows version. Android's going to take a little bit more time because it needs to go through that process to test and make sure that everything is where it needs to be. But if you want that latest and greatest, you're going to go with the Windows machine, based on that side. But Android, you get the same experience from the end user perspective, how it works, pressing the button, the team experience, versus the Windows experience. So I would say that it comes down to the Windows experience being the latest and greatest, if that's what you want, being on the forefront, versus taking your time and having that experience be, this is stable, this is working, we can get everything on as it comes and gets tested. That's what you're really seeing the implications on that side.
Yeah, I would agree. Right. So it's it's kind of relatively simple. Obviously Microsoft is going to test and release all new greatest features for anything that's Windows based. They've made a commitment to support all Android devices as well, just maybe not the same time frame as they are on the Windows side of things. So it's an organizational decision what's best for your organization, right? So what are you going to support more easily from a security perspective, from a user experience perspective? It really becomes more that decision than anything else. So, Rob, I guess, would you say the same thing, or do you kind of differ in opinion?
No, so I think you've made a good point from a security perspective. So I think clearly organisations will have a decision to make in terms of do they want to have Windows devices or Android in their environment, and a decision kind of well, that could well be the security that goes around each of those and the different kind of positions that they have. I think the other thing as well is having the different feature sets, which Chris mentioned. So what we've seen historically has been Windows-based Teams rooms have had the features ahead of Windows, and I guess where there could be kind of a conflict there is where you have a mixed environment of Windows-based Teams rooms and Android with different feature sets. A user walks into one room and has one experience, then goes to a different room and gets a different experience. So it's not a right or wrong thing. It's more just kind of being able to set those expectations so users understand when they walk into a room, what's expected of them. And if it's literally just hit the green button to join, then great. It's nice and consistent. But if there's features that are only in one particular room versus another one, users need to understand that. Otherwise, they're going to leave that room disappointed that they've not had the meeting that they expected to. So those are probably some of the consideration points that I would look at, and kind of how you support your user community going forward based on whatever technology you've chosen to deploy. The last point I want to, I guess, cover on this kind of section was around key advances that we've seen in the last 12 months, and I know we've been focusing pretty heavily on Teams Room in this particular section, but what are we seeing, or what have we seen in the past 12 months from a technological advancement perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI has become ubiquitous across every technology, so we don't escape it either, right? So I think what you're seeing is kind of the layering of AI over a Teams meeting experiences, or doesn't not just Teams, any meeting platform, what that experience looks like, from coaching somebody presenting to kind of collating meeting notes, any number of different things. I think we're also going to see the ability to use AI to actually assess the technical performance of the meeting as well, from an audio quality perspective, from a systems perspective, and then do some maybe automated remediation as well. So I don't think that I know everybody, AI is the biggest buzzword there is right now. I don't think it's a flash in the pan by any means. I think it's going to be something that's going to affect us all, and it's it's going to be kind of ongoing and forever green. So I don't know, Chris, what do you think? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I would agree. I think on the forefront is AI. That's what everyone's talking about now, and that's what people are asking us about from the customer standpoint, is how are you utilizing AI, or how can we utilize AI in our applications, and how can, from a support side, can we utilize AI in terms of reporting, in terms of analytics, in terms of what you had mentioned, Joe, making sure that the meeting operated the way that it need to. What's the feedback that we get from it? So those types of experiences and reporting is what's going to help advance the use of the room, but also help the customer shape what that user experience is and what they're going to do 3 to 5 years from now. So I know we keep coming back to the user experience, but that's where that really is. So, and the other advancements on technology would be from the one touch to join. We've seen that come over the last advance over the last few months, but also where we had technology in place and vendors in place that were bridging the two, all those platforms together. Now it's becoming more native, and so the user really doesn't need to rely all the time on third-party type applications to bridge that conference. They are just able to walk in the room and connect to who they need to connect to. So that's what we're seeing on those sides. Rob?
Yeah, and I think AI is kind of top of mind, isn't it? When we talk about advancements, we've seen it from our customers. Looking to us as thought leaders to be able to really innovate in this area. And so an area that we've been looking at is really actually outside of the actual meeting. But what can we do to ensure that when somebody walks into a meeting, they have a really good and positive experience? And so we're looking at kind of preventative alerting type solutions to ensure that if we think there might be an issue, so not that there's an issue, but we think there might be an issue just based on the trending that we're seeing from all the data, we can go in there, we can take action. Obviously, if there's an issue, then we're getting that alert anyway, but we're just trying to get ahead of the game to try and leverage AI and machine learning to try and predict when faults might occur and just ensure that users don't walk in and have a bad experience. Okay, so we've spoken at length now, I guess, in terms of the different options that customers have from a technical perspective. But how are customers actually assessing those choices, and how are they making those choices?
Yeah, I mean, I think it begins with kind of like really an inventory, right? So I think it's always surprising when we see the knowledge base of what exists within a customer estate is sometimes lacking. That can be from just historical data not being accurate, or maybe there hasn't been an assessment done in 3 or 4 years or something like that. So I think the very first thing is an assessment of where are we today. And then I know we keep hammering this and going back, but it's so important is understanding the workflow of their customers, right? Of the employees of their organization, so that they can kind of make a move forward, make a decision forward of what's going to make the most sense for their larger audience. So I think the biggest challenge is an inventory and an understanding where they are, and then you can kind of hit the ground running from a design perspective. I guess, Chris, what else do you see?
Uh, you hit it right on the head there, Joe. That's exactly what I'm seeing as well. And it's also when they're assessing and their technology choices. In the past, it would be let's just throw something against the wall and make it work. As you mentioned, the user experience is the forefront of all of that. So they're using the reporting. They're doing surveys of their users to find out what they want that experience to look like. But they're also looking to subject matter experts like ourselves to help them make those decisions, because as we know, technology is constantly changing. So as they're bridging that gap, and if it's a large enterprise, because we have a lot of large financial and pharmaceutical companies out there that have invested years and time and money into certain technology, it's okay. As these things are coming offline and as they're going end of life, that's where they're bringing in the technology to replace that rather than go all in at once. Just from a budgeting perspective, it makes more sense for them to do it slowly on that scale of things. Rob, how about yourself?
Yes, I think a combination of what you both said is right on the money. I think the vendors now have gotten very good at being able to showcase their solutions as well. So obviously being able to tap into that and to take our customers to the relevant kind of executive briefing centers and kind of see the latest and greatest. Also get an insight into what's coming down on roadmaps. I think that allows customers to make an informed decision because there's a lot of choice. I think we're in a pretty privileged position that we've got a lot of customers that deployed a lot of different types of technology, so we know what works, what doesn't, and kind of what maybe might be a bad path to go down, and we can help steer the customer. So yeah, I think just giving the customer as much data and as insight as possible, that's our job, right? To make sure that we're helping the customer get as much information, as much insight to help them make the right decision for their organization. All right, guys, thank you very much. So let's talk about user experience. So, Chris, you've mentioned it a few times already, so I know this is close to your heart. So, um, what do users expect, and how does that impact the technical choices and the designs that we ultimately put forward?
Users expect that when they walk into the room, the system will work, but in the simplest way possible. They want the experience to be as if they were at home on their laptop or on whatever machine they have, and they just press the button and it works. But it's not just getting the system to work. They want the user interface to look the same. They want that experience to be the same across the board. So when you're on so let's just say a Teams call from your laptop and you have your window set up and you see the 5 or 6 different people in there, they want to be able to walk into a room and have that same experience. They no longer want that long boardroom shot of small faces. They want it to be, I can see Joe's face, I can see Rob's face, I can see my face. That's what they want it to be because it gives that level of personal communication and personal touch. So that's what they're expecting and what they want to see. And I think that comes from standardization across the room as well, which making sure that that experience is the same across the board wherever they go. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit on the head there with what the expectation is. Sometimes you used to have those telepresence rooms, and I think those have gone by the wayside now. And I think what we've actually seen is rooms have done with 90-degree shift even physically, right? Just because they want to have that one-to-one experience, even though they're in a boardroom or if we're in our house. So I think that they're expecting the exact same experience that I think you hear a lot about meeting equity, right? So the things should work the way they should, and it shouldn't matter where you're sitting, and you should get the same input regardless of where you're sitting, right? So totally agree. There's very high expectations. Sometimes difficult to deliver on expectations, but that's kind of why we're here, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about those expectations. So, what typically happens when something goes wrong, and that expectation isn't met, and how does that impact our customers and how they're kind of trying to manage these rooms?
When something goes wrong, the user automatically assumes that the meeting is completely failed. That's what it is. And there is a high chance that they will never use that room again because it hasn't worked once. They don't want to go back in there. So what needs to happen from the support perspective is the customer utilizing proactive monitoring to make sure that it is working when it needs to work. So when the user walks in the room, it does work because they have invested all that money. They want to make sure that the user continues to use that room. So how do they manage that room from a proactive standpoint? How do they make sure that there is support immediately available? Because if it does go wrong, time is money. Those meetings cost lots and lots of time and lots of money for whoever's in that room. So they need to make sure that it gets back up and running too. So it's immediate support. That's what they need to keep it going. And that's what the user expects. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think, if something goes wrong, people will wonder, why did I come back into the office? Right? Why did I spend my time, whether it's a 15-minute commute, an hour commute, whatever the case may be there. And I think all of our customers are faced with the same challenge of trying to get people to return to the office. And if it isn't basically a pretty perfect experience, there's really just a question of, what's the point of me coming here if I'm just going to sit in my office and do a meeting from my desktop like I would have done at my house, right? So I would say that it's really cannot make it simple enough. And I think again we it can be a struggle to get there, and it can be a struggle to make it consistent across your entire enterprise. From if you have thousands of rooms, trying to make every single experience the same can be a tall order. So I guess Rob, what do you see when if something goes wrong or if a meeting is missed? What's the complaint typically, or what's the feeling from the end user?
Yeah. So that's a great point because oftentimes a user won't make a complaint, right? You walk into a meeting room, you have a bad experience, you go, well, that didn't work, and you walk out and you go and sit at your desk and take it somewhere else, or go to a coffee shop or your car and take it up from your phone. So, the behavior that we see is not necessarily there's an issue, I need to report it and say, hey, this was a bad experience. So, I think again we're quite lucky in that we get access to all of the data that shows us kind of when an issue happens. We get alerts that say, hey, this has been a bad experience, or there's been a fault here. So we get all of that data, but that's not always the case. So you might have users that are walking in having a bad experience, and people are unaware about it, and that's really, really difficult because you can't fix a problem that you don't know you have. So I would say, that's probably one of the big challenges that customers will have, is making sure that they have a really good mechanism to report these faults, and then obviously them to be able to triage and to address them. But you need to understand what's going wrong before you can fix it. Which leads me nicely on to kind of the supporting side of things, and how do we see our customers supporting this increased demand for video collaboration within their organizations? How are they supporting more and more rooms and more users?
I think what a lot of the customers that we see are looking to companies like ourselves, like Neura, to help them define what support can look like, but also support it for them because they 90% of the time, 99% of the time, don't have the staff to support this technology because they might be, as we know, everything shift to IT worlds, which is fantastic, IT, but IT is focused and their experience is on the network side of things and on computing devices, so laptops, desktops, servers, those types of things. When it comes to the Teams room experience, or the video experience, the collaboration experience, those are things that still is a bit of a niche market, and so they want to make sure that it's getting that support that it needs consistently across the entire enterprise. So they look towards companies like ourselves or other MSPs to provide that service for them. So they know that the experience is there and they know that their users are getting that support that they need. So that's what I see on our side from the customer standpoint. Joe, how about yourself?
Yeah, so this is why kind of standardization is so important. So when you're kind of developing what those standards are and rolling them out across your enterprise, it becomes extremely important, obviously from the user perspective we talked about. But if something does go wrong, if something breaks, being able to know exactly what's in that room because it's the same as the other 500 rooms that you have, troubleshooting that is going to be a whole lot easier than, I walk into the room and I'm not sure what's there, right? So I think that's why having a standard, even if it's multiple vendors and things in the room, having a standard becomes super important. It's going to make your triage time a lot faster when you do have somebody on site, or if you have somebody remote, troubleshooting the same systems over and over again is going to be a lot easier, right? Than it is, trying to figure out what is this random device that's sitting on the room, never seen it before. So I think that's why that's why we harp on user experience being consistent, standards being consistent. It helps the whole kind of workflow through. Because Robert, are you kind of seeing this type of effort going across, or is it still a little bit of a struggle?
Yeah, so I think you're on the money with talking about standardization. I just think it helps not only the user experience but also that support organization that's on the back of it. I think kind of what I've been seeing as well is there's definitely been more of a shift from previously it would be, hey, we've deployed 50 more rooms. That's going to translate to we need 2 more on-site bodies to be able to go and do floor walks or do their day-to-day support. What we've seen now is customers actually not looking to put necessarily people in every single office or every single location. They might be in their key locations, but a lot of those kind of support personnel are actually now remote, and that could be a centralized office or it could be regional based. But we're seeing more and more customers that are now not looking to necessarily have bodies in every single location because a lot of the activities to support the ecosystem can actually be done remotely now via the different tools and applications and service providers that can deliver that value without having somebody can necessarily outside a room waiting for someone to shout that something's gone wrong. But I think that standardization message is absolutely key. So we're coming close to the end of our time. We've got one more question. So how can a service provider help improve some of the frustrations or challenges that we've just spoken about that might arise in collaboration spaces?
I think a service provider can improve the user frustration by, I think I mentioned earlier, is by being that support for the end user and that customer. So they have that experience and they have the technical knowledge to provide that proactive support, proactive monitoring, remote support, remote monitoring and management of those devices, making sure that the firmware needs to be where it needs to be at all times, doing the reporting, providing the analytics, and making sure that the user from that meeting experience has that concierge level of support, whether it's in person or remote, to know that their meeting is getting taken care of and that they feel seen and heard. As long as you're providing that, the customer experience will shoot up and they will have that satisfaction what they need. Whether or not there's an issue in the room, there's an issue in the room, as long as they feel seen and heard and taken care of, boom, then you're set and their experiences met the needs of what they want. So that I think is a priority from that service provider perspective. Joe and Rob, I don't know what you're seeing, but any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's a question of scale too, right? So I think, if you look at an IT organization inside of an enterprise, their jobs are going to be many different work streams and devices and things like that, right? So video is going to be one microcosm of all the different things that they have to support, whereas we are effectively purpose built to support just that and nothing else. So from a scale perspective, I think the service provider should be able to help that scale. Maybe triage is done from a level 1 perspective at the customer level, and then it kind of gets escalated up to the service providers for maybe levels 2, 3, and 4. So from my perspective, it's really a scale play.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about that kind of level one triage. So, many customers obviously have that support organization in place today, so they can take that level 1 kind of support function. But then, the ability to escalate that into level 2, level 3 rather, into a field engineer dispatch, having a single SLA that can ensure that kind of from a time to resolution perspective, that's tracked right through. I think that's value which a service provider can bring to customers. Right, guys, I think we've reached the end of our time. So thanks for the chat. I think it was really interesting from my perspective anyway. So thanks for your time, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Joe.